Good evening. My name is Barry Johnson. A little bit about myself. I've been in Child Protective Services for 21 years before I retired. In the process, I did investigations, I did in home services, and I did supervision. Um, a lot of what I did because of my background. Um, Prior to that, I got my BSW at East Carolina, and then prior to that, I was in the Marine Corps. When I look at the project and the purpose of this paper, for me it was what does it mean to understand ourselves and others in a variety of ways and setting from the time we are born till the time we die, knowing that we were created to be in a relationship through communication with others. That begged the question for me, what is communication? Peterson talks about it on two levels. He talks about it on information sharing as well as the fact that it's about connecting with others. Stewart does the same thing, and I quote him: "The conversation is the relationship." It's about who we are and how we relate to others. That's what communication's about. Um, it's a process, according to Stewart, that is continuous, complex, and a collaborative process between verbal and nonverbal meaning. Another quote. It's about how we communicate, what we say, what we don't say. Communication is complex. It's not a simple thing to understand, and as a result, there's a lot of misunderstandings involved in communication. But basically, communication is defining who I am. When I communicate to you, I want you to know who I am. And I hope that the messages I'm sending, whether it be meta messages or other messages, or whether it be verbal or nonverbal, or the tone of my voice, whatever the case may be, is communicating to you who I am, who I really am as an individual. Now, obviously, you can't get to know me without time, but hopefully, in this process of communicating, you're getting a better idea of who I am. What does it convey? Well, it conveys everything. For me, communication has been difficult because there are barriers that I had to overcome. I grew up in an abusive home. My sister was sexually abused from the time she was 8 until 14. I've struggled understanding what it means to be a believer, particularly because I had parents that said they were Christians, and yet I suffered physical abuse, witnessed domestic violence, had a sister that was sexually abused. The dichotomy is troubling, to say the least. Um, for me, I had to develop a theory, and I didn't realize there was a name for this theory until later on. And recently, it's come out as being the life course model, which basically means that everything that's happened in my life from the beginning until the day I die will impact me, and that there's a cumulative effect. And basically, 2 plus 2 doesn't equal 4, 2 plus 2 equals 5. It's synergetic. In other words, all of these things that happen to me eventually come back to impact on me. And unfortunately, the net effect is greater than the sum of its parts, um, which is kind of discouraging. But fortunately, there are mitigating factors such as strengths that really come into play to help mitigate that risk. But it's an interesting theory, and for me, it makes sense that everything that I've experienced is going to impact everything down the line. And I'm actually encouraged by that because it's given me the ability to relate to other individuals that I would not be able to relate to because of what I've suffered. I understand I can empathize with them because I've been through it. And I can put myself in their shoes and really relate to them in a way that a lot of people can't. And that's a blessing, though I didn't always see it that way. I took the life motto as to know, exemplify, magnify Christ, standing firm, encouraging others to do the same. And the reason I took that verse is because of what happened to me in my life. At age 16, I heard Ravi Zacharias speak, and the reality of the scriptures came alive. And I realized that God cared about me, and that it was about a relationship. It was very impacting. I can't begin to describe how freeing that realization was. But it was based on the verse, Philippians 1:20 and 21, which says, "According to my earnest expectation, my hope, that in nothing I shall be ashamed, but that with all boldness and now as always, Christ will be magnified in my body, whether by life or by death. For me to live is Christ, and to die is gain. And that brings us, why is this important? Why is communication important for enlarging the conversation? Well, because it's about encouraging others. It's about responding to those people around me, whether believer or non-believer. Hebrews talks about encouraging helps me and helps others by helping us not to be hardened in our heart by sin's deceitfulness. And you have first, 2 Timothy 4:2 or Colossians 4:6, talks about our speech and our communication and being ready in season or out of season to give, to be able to talk about what we believe, and that our speech in that process needs to be full of grace, seasoned with salt. And how do I understand that unless I take the time to really learn about this process of communication and what it means to listen, what it means to hear? I can't. To be honest with you, there's no way I can do it unless I take the time to really grow in the process. The number one strategy or resource that I would advocate is ultimately a relationship with Christ. We go nowhere without it. The wheel and the hand I'm going to use here in a minute just to describe that very briefly. And then I would look at assessments. For me, assessments have been very vital. I was first introduced to choleric, melancholy, sanguine, and phlegmatic when I was around 16 by Tim LaHaye in his books, Transforming Temperaments, I believe, and The Spirit-Filled Temperaments. I don't have the references, and I don't even have the books anymore. I just ordered them again recently because of this class, just a couple of days ago, as a matter of fact. But it's really about understanding who we are. If I understand myself, I'm able to deal with things on a much greater level, but I can't really understand myself until I really understand my relationship to God. So I've been encouraged by that process. Ultimately, it's about Christ being the center of my life. And then ultimately there are aspects of that: prayer, the word, fellowship, witnessing, and then where the rubber meets the road. If Christ isn't the center, if Christ is not a part of my life, I really don't understand who I am. And for me, that's a vital aspect of communication, understanding first who I am. And then it's really understanding what God has to say to me. And that's, I have to hear the word. I hear, and that's how I believe. I hear, I read, I study it, I memorize, I meditate, and then I apply it. That sixth one is mine. But, it's about understanding who we are. And to be honest with you, I can't control this book unless I got all 5 fingers. Now, it's an analogy, and all analogies break down at some point. But it's a really good example of, who we are and how I control and I can use what God has given me to really encourage others, encourage myself, and to grow in my relationship with Christ. The DISC model was not new to me. I took the first test in 1987, and I'm actually an SC by that test. However, what I found was interesting, and this goes to a conversation or a written conversation that I had, but it in a crisis situation, I actually stayed. The finding or the graph from 1987, which was 30 years ago, is the same, pretty much the same graph as in 2017, which I thought it was interesting because our scenario had to do with the crisis situation and how to react, and I react the same way. I just thought it was very, very interesting that under the same circumstances I respond the same way, which gives credence to this idea of, this particular resource. As far as an action plan, what do I need to do? Well, for me, I need to refocus. I need to get back to basics. I need to reconnect with other believers that I've lost contact with over the years. I need to reevaluate where I am and where I'm going, and basically what I need to do to get there. And then ultimately, I need to re-examine my communication practice with my children, my wife, and other individuals around me, because communication is vital. I'm going to leave with this final thought. Pain, unheard and unheeded, eventually explodes, in the process lives are lost. This could have been me, but it's not, because somebody took the time to hear me and heeded my cry. Thank you.